Hello, Pranur Singh. Thank you so much for coming to the very first episode of our podcast. I'm so glad that you came for the first podcast, and trust me, I won't have any other guest for the first podcast. So, you have been very vocal about the Indian defense and more so about the current situation at LAC. So, my question to you is that how did or what did we, India, as an India, we did that we came into this situation? And what has happened into past 130 days if to the LAC or the Indo-China conflict, if you may call so.
So first of all, thank you, Ritvik, for inviting me for to the first episode of the podcast. I'm really excited. This is the first time I'm doing something like this, and I wish you all the luck for the podcast series.
Thank you so much.
I'll dive straight into what has happened. To understand what has happened, look, basic for everyone. For this is what has happened in Ladakh, that the Chinese troops, the PLA, has transgressed into the territory that India claims as its own. What is the issue? We need to go back about 200 years to understand how did Ladakh became a contention between China, basically not the China, the CCP. Mind it, like when we say we have a tiff with China, we mean with CCP, not with the Chinese people, civilization, or the whole culture, the whole Chinese culture. So in 1834, under the command of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, General Zorawar Singh Kalhuria had a battle with the Tibetan dynasty, won the battle, and annexed Tibet. In 1845, after the defeat of the Sikh Empire in the First Anglo-Sikh War, Raja Gulab Chand Dogra, who was the governor of Jammu region, paid about 50 lakh rupees, 50 lakh Nanak Shahi rupees to the British administration in the Treaty of Lahore, and got sovereignty over the present day Jammu and Kashmir, which includes Tibet as well. In 1947, as we know, we got independence, partition happened, the whole hullabaloo over Kashmir also happened. So I won't dwell into the Kashmir issue and all that because that's too lengthy. I'll come straight to Tibet. It's basically the Ladakh area. So Ladakh area earlier, as before 1834, used to be the part of Ladakh and the Baltistan area, which is in Baltistan is in the POK. Used to be part of the Tibetan dynasty, the Tibetan kingdom. Sikhs won it. Then Jammu and Kashmir administration got under it. So the part to like the Ladakh area is at immense height. It has almost zero vegetation, has very less rainfall, has almost no natural resources. It's just a huge, wide, barren land which is very sparsely populated. So up till when 1947, when we got independence, and the whole issue of Jammu and Kashmir state happened, Jammu and Kashmir issue became contention with Pakistan, and the Ladakh issue became a contention with the Chinese government, the communist government. In 1947, the CCP came to power after the Cultural Revolution. Zhou Enlai and the Communist Politburo had a dream of a huge Chinese mainland, that every country would be under communist rule and all that. So they started claiming sovereignty or claiming rights over Ladakh, Bhutan, Sikkim, and Nepal region, which today we call as Arunachal Pradesh. About from 1947 to 1958, we didn't had any confrontation with the CCP. There wasn't any violent confrontation. Zhou Enlai was adamant on getting Ladakh because they had this dream of to revive the Silk Route. But Pandit Nehru wasn't in favor of that. He said that this before partition has been part of the Indian territory. Kashmir is a part of India. The whole Jammu Kashmir state is a part of India. Thus, Ladakh is also a part. So there was a lot of contention. Aksai Chin was kind of the Aksai Chin today is unfortunately in Chinese control. At that time, it wasn't either in Indian control nor in Chinese control. We had an understanding because it was really difficult to patrol that area. It is a very unforgiving, barren land. the temperatures, fall drastically. There is no water. It's really tough to live. There's no country used to, have permanent settlements over there. In 1958, on October 21st, 1958, which we celebrate as Police Martyrs Day, an action took place between the Chinese troop and the Indian CRPF, which is the Central Armed Police Force. We lost around 10 people. 10 were taken hostage. Not 10, I'm sorry, we lost almost 2 dozen people in that action. Please correct me if I'm wrong, I might be missing my figures. And then we realized that the Chinese dragon wants to take over the land. So for a couple of years, and then 1959, Tibet took over. Chinese Communist Party took over Tibet. The Dalai Lama ran, came into India. He was given refuge in India. A lot of Tibetans who were not who were loyalists to the Tibetan kingdom came to India. Became refugees in our country, which angered the Chinese. They were like, why are you giving refuge to the people who are against Chinese Communist Party in India? And that started, aggravated the whole issue. And which in 1962, became a full-blown war, in which unfortunately we lost. Then, over the years, then in 67, the Nathula incident and Chola incident happened. India became victorious. In 75, this kingdom of Sikkim became part of India, which angered the Chinese as they claimed rights over Sikkim and Bhutan both. And Bhutan has been very close to India. We have signed treaties with them if somebody transgresses into Bhutan, Indian forces would help the Bhutanese kingdom, like we helped in Doklam. Doklam isn't an Indian territory; it's in Bhutanese territory. But the Indian soldiers were in Doklam because we have a treaty with the Bhutan. In 1987, the same situation happened, that we are facing today. It took almost 7 years. Then in 1994, we had a ratification with them that we would not fight over this piece of land. Over there we signed kind of agreement, and came to an agreement that the troops at the LAC from both the Chinese side and the Indian side wouldn't carry loaded firearms. If you see the troops in all the videos, Indian and the Chinese troops, they have their guns onto their backs. The guns are unloaded, which basically means that they are not there for a firefight. If they are not there for a firefight, we generally have fist fights, rock throwing, stone pelting, and what we saw in Galwan, that spears and not spears, but baseball bats, spikes, and all were used. So what has happened since the April of 2020 is that China has transgressed into the areas which we called our, China called theirs, but we had an agreement that none of the armies or the forces responsible for patrolling the borders. For India, it's ITBP, and for Chinese, it's their respective border guards, would come into that place. So, for example, this is point A, which China patrols still here. This is point B, and India only patrols still here. Okay? The space between them, the space between them is a no man's land. Basically, no country patrols or goes up till there. Do not have their camps over. So what has happened since 2020? The no man's land, China has transgressed onto that. We kind of didn't, see that coming. There may be intelligence failure and whatnot. So we have been caught off guarded over it.
So you talked about Aksai Chin. Do you think it is anyhow possible that this is anyhow connected with the passing of Article 370? Because after passing of Article 370, the Indian government said that now Ladakh is a union territory. And do you think anyhow Chinese government felt insecure about that, and this is all happening because of that?
See, it can be a reason, it can be one of the few reasons, but it cannot be the only reason that China is transgressing here, because they are doing the same thing they've done the same thing in Sikkim, in Arunachal Pradesh. We recently saw that 5 men from Arunachal Pradesh were abducted by the PLA ground forces, However, PLA said they wandered into their territory, which is, farce. Everybody knows that. There can be various reasons that China is picked, because it's not only India that China is messing with. It's Vietnam, it's Philippines, it is Japan. They're doing this with everyone they share a border with. They are claiming rights over South China Sea, and all that. They are trying to, they're following this policy of salami slicing. What they are doing, they're not just sending their troops, all troops, into Ladakh for a war. They're not doing this. They'll come for a few kilometers, make their posts, then go back, then come, then go back, then they'll come for 8 kilometers, then they'll strike a deal. They'll say, okay, we'll go 50% back. They'll have now control over 4 kilometers inside Indian territory. They're doing this. They're not taking everything at one time. They slowly and steadily, they're trying to gain what we say territory of various countries, not just India, of various countries.
So, God forsake, but do you think there is going to be a war between India and China? And if so, there is going to be a war between India and China. Whom do you think? Do you think India is going to be able to stand up against China and defend itself?
First of all, I'll make this very clear that we should never wish for a war. As they say, only the dead has seen the end of the war. I've had relatives who've been in the armed forces who've almost fought. I know people who've almost fought every war that the Indian troops have been involved in, from the First World War, Second World War, 71, 65, 62. I know people, So, as they say, as look, war is, it may sound fun to us, but it's really it's a harrowing experience for the people who are involved in. So at any point of time, any country in this world should avoid having a war, especially if the war is between two nuclear armed countries. It should be avoided at any cost possible. Now, coming back to the point, if the war breaks out, and let's hope it does not, but if it does, that will India will be able to stand up to China? To that, I say absolutely yes. You need to realize that there are two thoughts of school in India right now, in school of journalism right now, journalism or the Vogue gang or the people who know a lot. There is one group which is saying that India would capture Beijing, we'll have the Tiranga flying in Beijing, they'll be speaking Hindi. This is the commando, as one of the famous editors of a famous news channel, not channel, a news site, the print, Mr. Shekhar Gupta says, makes, calls these news channels as combat commandos, journalists rather than journalists. They are claiming that India would go into China. The Chinese soldiers are scared. They won't fight and all that, which is not true. Chinese army is a professional army. They will fight us. Then there is another group of people saying, "Oh my God, don't fight, don't fight. India will lose. China would kick us. Right? China will take over Ladakh. China will, take over Delhi. We'll be all speaking Mandarin." It is not true. Again, that is also false. Left and the right both are trying to change the narrative just to suit their agendas. Now, coming back to the point, will India be able to hold off China? Absolutely yes. You need to realize the fact that our soldiers are extremely well trained. We have, a lot of experience fighting wars, especially in mountainous regions. Siachen, we literally took that away from Pakistan. Kargil War is a case study in all the top military institutes like Sandhurst, West Point, you name it. They say like India won a war where people were thinking that India wouldn't be able to, without crossing the borders, by the way. Okay, so our soldiers are extremely smart, well trained. They're led by highly competent officers, who have rich experience. And in the last 5 years, we have been able to update ourselves when it comes to weaponry. Indian forces have, we're not the old army that we would see the photos that our men are not are wearing extremely cumbersome body armor, no helmets and all that, or carrying around, not really good weapons. There has been massive change. All our troops have best communication systems. We've got our own satellite. We've got new advanced combat helmets, new high quality, very light, very durable, very useful, very flexible weaponry. uh, we've got good new ballistics in our kitty. In a few years time, almost in a few months, we'll be getting the S-400 anti-aircraft missile system, which is considered the best in the world. So it's not like we won't be able to hold them up. And especially end of the day, the weaponry or no doubt helps you win battles, but it's also the grit and the training of the soldier. And given the fact, now I'll say something very controversial. A lot of people may call me casteist for it, which I am not. I'll put it out there that we have been following. It's correctly we have been following the Marshall race theory, in which a group of people, the Britishers came and said that okay, these are the groups and communities of people who are martial in nature. And over the years, it has become a martial culture. And they've had a martial culture. The Jats, the Rajputs, the Gorkhas, the Sikhs, the Punjabis. We've had a rich martial culture, which we saw in the 62 war. The Ahirs of the Ahirwal, which is basically placed between southern Haryana and the borders between Haryana and Rajasthan, Ahirwal, which we'll call Mahendragarh district, Rewari district, Gurgaon, Faridabad. These are Ahirwal regions where a lot of people, Ahirs as they say, reside, and they love joining the army. It's a passion for them. So, and in the Battle of Rizangra, under the command of Major Shaitan Singh, who was later awarded Paramveer Chakra, we saw how the 120 Ahirs stood there till the last man. Only 6 or 7 survived, and they held off a whole brigade attack of China. Now, a brigade in a military sense has almost 3 to 5,000 soldiers along with support elements, and they held them off when the Chinese were better armed in 62. The Chinese had automatic weapons. They had the Type 56, which is an AK-40 AK variant. They had the SKS. They had better quality weapons, while we were stuck with the 303 Lee Enfield bolt action rifles, which were a relic of First World War, some Sterling submachine gun, and some Brents. So we held them off when we didn't had a lot of weaponry. Now Indian forces have best of weaponry. We are getting new guns, the 6 hour S716 guns. We are getting extremely potent battle rifles. When the last year I visited the United States, I was able to shoot them and I could make out that these were actually real good guns. We recently signed about an agreement with Israel for about 16,500 LMGs, which are NG7s, extremely potent Negev weapon, Negev LMG, extremely potent. Our forces are getting new sniper rifles. We are getting Barrett M95s. We are getting Scorpio TGTs, which have 338 Lapua. So we are getting better. The only place that I think we have a problem is the Air Force, especially the combat squadron. We have, our squadron, we should have around 42 squadrons. We only have around 32 squadrons, which is dangerous. Only place. But having said that, it's not like Chinese would overpower us. We'll have a certain disadvantage when it comes to the Air Force, but you need to realize the terrain of that area is such that the planes over there do not perform to their full capacity, full capability. For example, the Sukhoi, the Chinese and the Indian, the most common jet in the Chinese inventory is the flanker model, the flanker variants, which are basically variants of Sukhoi Su-27 and Sukhoi Su-30 and 35. They have J-11, which is the licensed version of the Russian Su-27. The problem with that jet is that particular jet, when in higher altitudes, the air is thinner. It needs a longer runway, and it cannot carry its full battle loadout with full internal fuel. The same thing happens with us, but we've got Rafale, the new Rafales, which are extremely potent jet, or the MiG-29s, which have better thrust to weight ratio, which helps plane take off with more weaponry and more fuel. And plus, are the closest airfield to the where the action is happening is the Leh airfield, which can accommodate these two, the MiG-29s and the Rafale. And the other airports which can accommodate and help these planes take the Sukhois, which form the backbone of the Indian Air Force. As of right now, we have about 12 squadrons of Sukhois, which 250 plus Sukhois. These can take off from airports like air bases like Pathankot and Halwara and Adampur, which are in the plains of Punjab, and they'll take couple of minutes, like 30-35 minutes, to reach to LAC and give China, a tough fight. Whereas the Chinese airfields are very behind from the LAC. The third issue is China claims to be, we have the certain people have made, a hype about China as if the Chinese army is an alien force, which it isn't. The J-20 that they have developed, the whole world is saying, oh my God, China has developed a fifth generation stealth fighter. Recently they had to downgrade it from fifth generation stealth fighter to 4.5 generation fighter because it is stealth in no way. China claims it has better S-400 and all that equipment. Recently, we saw American U-2 plane, which is a stealth plane, flew over China. Now, U-2 stealth plane is the oldest stealth plane. It was developed in the 1960s. America has SR-71 Blackbird. It has B-117 Blackhawk. And with just the U-2, they were able to, checkmate China. So China, we can conquer China. We not conquer as if we can go and capture whole of Beijing, not that, but we would be able to, hold them off and stand our ground. Though we'll have a lot of casualties, which is, unfortunate reality of war.
But how do you think it portrays on the Modi government? Because Modi government throughout its tenure has been a nationalist party. They have ignited a belief of nationalism amongst all Indians or the right people of our country. So how do you think it reflects on the Indian government? Because according to you, we should not initiate a war or we should not initiate of capturing our lost territory. And according to majority of news channels, India has lost almost 100 square kilometer of the portion of Aksai Chin. So how do you think it portrays on the Modi government?
You need to realize one thing that Aksai has never been in the Indian control, so we haven't, nor we have captured it, nor we have, lost. And 100 kilometers square, you need to realize the fact it is nothing in Ladakh because there is no physical borders. Like if you go to Punjab, let's make sure we go to Punjab. There are borders there which have wiring and everything, right? But it does not have the same in Ladakh. You can literally walk 1 second, you are in India, the other second you can be in China. Recently, we saw the news in Sikkim. Indian Army intercepted a car, which was a Chinese vehicle. It had Chinese civilians in it, and they had inadvertently come into India because they took a wrong turn. Hilarious as sounds, but it tells you that the whole region has no physical boundary. It is all we perceive. So if they have taken 100 kilometers square, as I've told you, they had come over in the no man's land, right? So we weren't actually, physically patrolling it, or we had actually physically claimed it over it. Our troops may go there, patrol, and come back. So this is what has happened. Now the Modi government, as you're saying that it has taken a nationalistic approach. It has, it has been selling nationalism, and just not Modi government. Majority of the world is now going the right way, which is the right wing way. We have, UK lefting a right wing a conservative, not right wing. They're not 100. The right wing has reinvented itself. It's not just conservative. Conservative government in UK. We have conservative government in a lot of countries. The conservatives in Canada, which is supposed to be the pallbearer of liberalism in the world, gave the Liberal parties and the NDP massive shock. Okay, the Liberal Party couldn't make a clear government. The NDP, led by Jagmeet Singh, wasn't able to, gain anything. It lost a lot of seats and a lot of vote bank. So every country in this world is today winging towards right. Now coming back to the point whether, how will it perceive to in Narendra Modi's government that because it has lost a lot of, area. There's a reason they were not transparent, because they didn't want it to hurt their political party's image. If we come down to it, because majority of the foreign affairs and everything is politics. It is nobody cares about what is wrong or right, what reflects good in their political electoral bank. Only then those steps are taken. I'll be very controversial and here say last year when the elections were happening, the general elections, we had surgical strikes, we had the unfortunate case of Pulwama attack in which we lost almost 40 of our Jawans, and then we did Pulwama. We had the prime minister going and asking votes in the name of Pulwama martyrs. So it works. We didn't have the right now the prime minister going and asking votes in the name of Galwan martyrs, because let's be honest, there are no elections coming in and there haven't been any tough step taken until now when the Indian forces, which a brigade of Indian forces, which included the Tibetan SFF, which is a very secretive unit, captured certain hilltops in the last 10 12 days in the Kailash region near the Pangong Tso, giving India, say a stronghold, which shows good on the Modi government, which may be useful, which they may or may not use in the elections which may be coming in. So let's hope, there is no war and, people vote logically.
Yeah, true, very true. But the Modi government also has not been very transparent to this information regarding LEC and everything happening between India and Indo-China. So, what is your viewpoint? Matlab, I don't think even the citizens required to know each and everything what is happening in the border. But what do you think regarding this? Because the people from left have been barging against this, that they have been hiding the information in LSE and they are not telling us what is happening there.
See, you need to realize that fact that even if we would have told, first of all, as I said, it looks bad on the government's for a part of view. If there is something you're losing out, the government wouldn't, want to let the people know. Having said that, even if we would have known, what change could have we made? We couldn't have gone there and fight for the nation. Hum ladenge. We would have taken all our every baseball bat, cricket bat that every one of us have to the border and fight. We couldn't have done that. So I think that was necessary, because if the government would have been telling everything to the opposition, then that would have been coming into the media as well, and that would have been kind of preempting, giving the enemy kind of an edge over what India is doing. So I don't think even if they would have told us anything, would have made any difference. The only person that shouldn't be in the loop should be the armed forces, which were obviously in the loop. That is how they carried out. We've seen how the whole Leh airport has been used effectively effectively by the Indian Air Force. Our heavy lift aircrafts like IL-76, C-17, C-17, C-130Js, AN-32s have been used, properly. We've been making landings at advanced bases, giving, there have been massive troop movements along the whole LAC. Our troops have gone, and the COVID lockdown helped in that the roads were empty, so the troops were able to mobilize a lot quicker. So the mobilization has been done. Yes, I agree with the fact that we were caught off guard. We were caught, we were not able to preempt that, but I think we have responded reasonably well to it. You cannot ask, that saying we should unko bahar bhagao. We cannot have a war. Simple as that. We cannot afford a war. If we go to war today with China, a full-blown war, we would be drained massively. China is not Pakistan. Simple as that. We can take on China, Pakistan very easily. We cannot take on China that easily. As I said, we have our shortcomings in the forces, which the government is trying well to plug it, but war should be avoided, and that is what the government is doing. And I think that is a smart move on the government's part to not tell everything, not have all its cards in the open, and be vulnerable. I think that I don't really mind that.
So both of our foreign ministers have been in talks. Jayashankar and Wong Hai both have been in talks, and they have came to certain terms and conditions for the agreement between India, China, and India. So, what is your take on that? And do you think that China is going to stay on that agreement? Because we have seen in the past that both of the countries have came to an agreement, but any of the party doesn't concise to it. Both either of the party take this step back from the agreement. What do you think this agreement has in it?
See, you need to realize that the China has come to table because the recent operations we carried out, when which we captured a lot of important and strategic hills. For example, I'll take example of two hills: the Kala Top, which is also known as Black Top, and the Helmet Top. Right? These directly overlook the finger four and finger eight on the Pangong Sol Lake. We have an advantage over the Chinese. We are at a height. We've got our apparatus in place. So the China is vulnerable. Chinese forces are vulnerable because we can see them very clearly. We can target them very easily, and they are in a disadvantaged position. That's why they are now coming to us, and they're like, please let's reach a consensus. Let's maintain the status quo. Let's not fight and all that. But it is China is trying to be really smart. I'm really happy that the government is able to call out their bluffs. What they have done is, like, they've come in 10 kilometers. Now they'll happily go back 5 kilometers, but in the end they have gained 5 kilometers. And I'm really happy that the government is like, no, you have to go back to the position that you were prior to the April 2020, which was all the way back 10 kilometers, which I think is smart. We should stick on it. And but having said that, a lot of military expert, I'm not a military expert, I'm just a student. However, a lot of military experts have cautioned the government that we should be ready for a limited war, not a full blown war, not a proper war, but a limited war, where we may be using the artillery, the air force, the every apparatus that the Indian Armed Forces have.
Okay. So let's say now Prabhu Singh is the new Prime Minister of India. What will be your first order in order to correct this whole scenario? Except for breaking our
I would,
college.
uh, first of all, who elected me the prime minister? Really bad choice. And now coming to
I agree.
the main point, I I would in all my senses, because ruling and fighting an election and then running the administration are two different things. The present government came to the power with a sense of bravado that yes, we will capture POK, yes, we will capture Aksai Chin and all that and that. But when you come to the power, you see what is the situation, you mellow down, and that is a smart move, honestly speaking. So if I would be prime minister, if it happens, in a parallel universe, I'll probably, do what the present government is doing right now. They're handling it really well. This particular situation, I'm not saying the all situation, everything. The government on a lot of fronts have been a failure, but this particular front, the LAC front, I'll go with the government. The government is actually being has been very proactive. The government in all sphere, defense sphere, has been really proactive. I think from induction of new weaponry, you know, modernization of the forces, the standardization of the modern equipment. Indian Armed Forces has a problem that we buy a lot of equipment from a different sources. We buy right now. Also, we are unfortunately doing the same thing with the assault rifles induction. We are buying about almost to 1.5 lakh from US, a few 100,000 from UAE, a few about 6-7 lakh of them from Russia. So what we are doing is we're trying to play a geopolitical role, which we shouldn't. But again, apart from this, a lot of good job has been done by the government in the matters pertaining to defense expenditure, not just defense expenditure, but the defense arena as in whole.
It was so great to have you on the first episode of the podcast. I'm so glad we talked today, and it's been a great 45 minutes, I guess.
It has been fun as well. It's the first time I'm doing something like this. As I said, it's fun, and I hope we can do this more on a myriad of topics. Not just this one. Even if this one, we'll just have to discuss if any further, thing happen. Having said that, it has been really fun. I look forward to it. Look forward to more podcasts and more talks with you. So, and best of luck for your new this new series. I'm really happy to be invited to be the first guest on this series, and thank you, and it has been a great pleasure.